So this is Apple's HomePod, and the first thing you notice when you take it out of the box is just how beautiful this thing is. It's covered in a 360-degree mesh fabric that's only interrupted by the power cord, which you can't remove, by the way, and a touchscreen on top. That's it. It's simple, it's pretty, and you should expect nothing less from Apple. The second thing you notice, however, is just how small this thing is, which is even more impressive when you hear the sound that can come out of it. So what's making that sound? Well, it's got 7 tweeters along the base of it and one 4-inch high excursion woofer on top. In between those two things, it has 7 microphones, 6 of them for Siri and 1 of them to measure the woofer. It also comes equipped with 2 things that are in your iPhone: an accelerometer to know when it's being picked up and moved so that it can adjust the sound accordingly, and an A8 processor, which arguably makes it the smartest smart speaker out there right now. Setup is pretty easy if you have an iPhone or an iPad, in that if you don't, it's impossible because you can't do it. That's right, you need an iOS device just to get this thing going. Once it's going, it'll ask you to play music, and it'll use the first few seconds of that song to figure out how to best play that music. It'll notice if there's a wall next to it that it can bounce vocals off of, it'll adjust to the sound of the room, etc. And that's really cool because you don't have to walk around with a microphone or measure your room and tell it how big it is or any of that. Siri takes care of all of it, and that's great.
Here's Dreams by Fleetwood Mac.
So how does it sound? Pretty good. Look, I'm not an audiophile, but I'm a musician, and I can tell the difference between this thing and its competitors, and it beats all of them. The Google Home Max is probably what I'd compare it to mostly as far as an assistant and sound goes, and it beats the Home Max in my opinion, and the Home Max costs $50 more. It's got crisp highs and super beautiful and filling low ends and a wonderful bass that you would not expect out of a thing this size.
Big Shot by Kendrick Lamar, Travis Scott now playing.
That being said, it's not perfect, however. The mid gets lost on me in a few songs, but for something this big, that's pretty understandable, and that might be adjustable with a few software updates. Quick sidebar. Until I move, this is where my HomePod is living. On my desk, next to my computer, where I can hear it in my room, also conveniently next to my cat's bed. So if you're ever wondering why anybody would ever spend the $39 for AppleCare on this thing, now you know. If you've read anything having to do with this thing over the past 8 months, yes, 8 months because it's been 8 months since this thing was announced. It's almost been a year since last year's WWDC, and it was announced then and it got delayed because it was supposed to come out in December. Anyway, if you've read anything having to do with this thing over the past 8 months, then you know that Apple has marketed it as a speaker first and an assistant second. And that's important to note because that's basically what it is. Now, just because that's the way they've marketed it doesn't mean that Siri should get a pass. It's an Apple product, and Apple products are always touted as revolutionary and life-changing and incredible. So, is it revolutionary? Sort of. Well, it will be. I mean, not yet, but... Okay, let me explain. The reason it's not revolutionary yet is the reason that everybody knows is the reason. Siri. I just activated, yep. Here's a few things right off the bat. I can't check my calendar with this thing. I can't hail an Uber with this thing. And that wouldn't be so mind-boggling if it weren't for the fact that me and anybody else in my house can check my messages and respond to them so long as my iPhone is on my Wi-Fi network. This thing doesn't have voice recognition. It has an A8 processor, but it doesn't have voice recognition. It has the same brain that is in your iPhone, but it can't do something that your iPhone has been able to do for a couple of years now. And that's weird. Which leads me to believe that Apple knows this and is working on it, and there's a good reason why that isn't a thing yet, especially with their emphasis on privacy. Siri is different on every device. My Apple TV Siri can do things that my iPhone Siri can't, and my MacBook Pro Siri can't do things that my iPhone Siri can't, and that's frustrating. The good thing about that is that the isolation allows for privacy. The bad thing is Siri gets screwed on certain devices, and the HomePod is one of them. This is a $350 smart speaker. I should be able to hail an Uber from it. I should be able to check my calendar or call my mom from it, and I can't. I have to reach for my iPhone for that. And that's a little weird. According to Apple, they've been at work on this thing for 6 years, and it shows in the hardware. Where the speakers on this thing takes leaps forward, the software actually takes a few steps back, which is weird because, again, 6 years and a delay. This thing was supposed to come out in December, remember that. And with those 6 years and a delay, it's missing features that Apple themselves promised. It doesn't have AirPlay 2 or stereo sound with another HomePod. It does have AirPlay 1 though, which is good because if it didn't, there'd be no way to play anything but Apple Music on this thing because there's no Bluetooth. Which I'm not necessarily mad at. Bluetooth isn't exactly high quality sound, so I understand why they omitted it. But maybe give us Spotify natively? Meh? The HomePod gets compared to the iPod and the AirPods a lot, which is understandable. I've compared a lot more to the Apple Watch. The Apple Watch changed a lot since it was announced, okay? It went from being an app-centric device to a notification-based and fitness-based device. I don't think Apple quite knew what consumers were gonna do with it when it got in their hands, and so it evolved. Everything changed, from the hardware to the software to their marketing. And I think the HomePod is gonna go through the same fate. It's gonna change a lot in a few years. The good thing though is because the hardware is so sound, you won't have to go out and buy the HomePod 2. It'll just come through software updates. Hopefully. So, should you buy one? Nope. Look, if you're like me, you should absolutely consider picking one of these things up. What I mean by that is if you're locked into the Apple ecosystem, you listen to Apple Music, you care about a high quality sounding speaker, and your privacy, look no further, here's your hardware. If you're locked into Apple's ecosystem, except you listen to Spotify instead of Apple Music or any of the third-party ones, consider picking up a Sonos. You can get 2 of them for the price of 1 HomePod, and it comes with Alexa out of the box. They're even adding support for Google's Assistant later. If you're locked into Apple's ecosystem, but you don't necessarily care about how good the speakers sound, you just want a smart assistant, maybe get yourself an Echo Dot or a Google Home Mini. If you use an Android, why are you still watching this video? Look, I work at home from a MacBook Pro, on the go with an iPad Pro. I have an iPhone and I take my AirPods everywhere because music runs my life. How that music sounds is just as important to me. If you can relate to all of that, then you might want to pick this thing up. Otherwise, wait a bit or check out its competitors because there are a lot of smart speakers out there.